You're listening to the Karmic Mirror podcast, where we explore the wisdom tucked within the layers of the self help world.
Together, we bridge the gap between esoteric teachings and practical tools for everyday life, with self love and personal growth at the heart of each conversation.
Whether you're a seasoned seeker or just beginning your path, join us and uncover the magic within and around you.
Hello, welcome, Karmic Mirror listeners. We are bringing you another voice note files because there has been something heavy in rotation and conversation, and yet we are not experts in this area, but we do want to talk more about it, and we'll see what else comes up per reflection of our voice notes. Often they start with a topic and lead to many other topics. Let's first welcome my beautiful co-host. Hi, Michelle.
Hello, everyone.
So, what is, without further ado, drum roll, what is our topic we're going to start out with today?
Oh my gosh, we're talking about tarot and divination practices and all that comes with that in that whole world. There's so much.
Yeah, I think we are not tarot card professional readers. However, we do each have our own decks. We interact with them in different ways. Of course, you've had access to us talking a lot about some of the people that influence us or who we lean towards. And, like a Chris Corsini, he also does tarot card readings. We
Hmm.
have a lot of outlets to that. But I think why this came up is well, why did it come up? Michelle, you were doing a,
Well, it came up because you have a practice, and you can elaborate more on this, but you had mentioned that you pull, I think you told me this last year, and I didn't do it, but this year I felt called to, and you mentioned that you do a spread for the entire year.
oh,
You'll
yeah, yeah.
pull a card for each month, and you can talk more about that. But this year, for whatever reason, I have my own deck here, and I'll talk a little bit about it. But I am like dip the toe baby tarot into this particular divination practice, but I really, really love it. And I think it's kind of been, I would say for me, anyways, on the back burner of things that I wanted to get to. But again, in this world of of wellness and the mystical and the esoteric. There's so many things. I'm like a sponge, and I have this never ending love of just learning and expanding and following the excitement. And tarot is one of those things that I've always wanted to get more into. I've wanted to learn more about. And even though I haven't necessarily like dove into the practice itself, over the last, I'd say maybe 2 years, I've wanted to just find myself getting more and more ingrained in my own practice, finding some more, I don't know if you'd say consistency with
Mhm.
the pulls, but just bringing it more into my daily life as part of my own rituals. And you mentioned Chris Corsini. He's someone, so I would say for me, anyways, like I said, it's been on the back burner, and it's been something I've wanted to get more into, but then little kind of hints like you're mentioning your spread for the year, and then that kind of inspiring me to want to do it. Also, Chris Corsini always being on the radar, but until this last year, and honestly, until we started Karmic Mirror podcast, I hadn't gotten really, really into his work. And but this year I've started to listen to his, he does a monthly he'll do a tarot card pull, or I think he does a whole spread for every zodiac sign, and he does it for every single month. And so I started, not every month, but I'd pop in when I'd see, his reading for Aquarius or for Leo, which is my sun sign. Aquarius is my rising, and I like to pay attention to those. And so I would start listening to him, and then it would
He'll do
inspire
pick a
me.
pile, which I think is really cool
Oh, that
too,
is
where
cool.
he'll have, pick one or two,
Oh,
and
yeah.
before it goes, and he'll just pick a card, and that's the one that
I love
whichever pile
that.
you picked. He does a lot with tarot cards.
I love it. And also, um, Crow Mother channeling on Instagram. I love her. I think she's just a super baddie. Like, I'm a big fan of hers. Please come on our show. And
Put it out
and
there.
she'll do tarot spreads, she'll do readings online, she'll be on Instagram Live. So if I see her on live, I try to pop into her live streams and just kind of just be in her energy and start to, because she's someone, I'm inspired by these people who are reading cards with such really intuitively, and they're very connected to they channel. And so I'm very, very inspired by that. And anyways, all that to say, I'm excited to finally start to get into it because there's always that kind of like little nudge, like little things will happen to kind of nudge you closer to the things that you're curious about. And, from a purely mental space, my process would be to like go research like what are the major arcanas? What do they mean? What are the different suites? What do they mean? And I haven't done that, which I'm really um almost kind of proud of myself that I haven't, because it almost feels counterintuitive to go at it from a mental place, although there are some very logistical things that you should probably know. But anyways, excited to talk about it some more.
Yeah. I've
Um,
I've learned a
yeah.
lot, no shock here, by just doing
That's exactly.
and
Well,
and ex
yes.
and experiencing it. So my first deck I got during COVID,
Mm,
coworker of mine who I was good friends with, he had a tarot deck and he was talking to me about it. And I had felt called, and it was COVID. So we had a lot of time on our hands. I got the exact same one he got, where I think one of the things they do say if you're buying decks, really feel into the one that you feel called to. And to your point, Michelle, they can have different decks have different meanings, right? And so
totally.
mine really works with like pentacles, wands, swords, cups, and those are the four main. And then you have your minor arcana and your major arcana. But, or wait, the minor arcana are those signs, but then you
Hmm.
have your court cards. But those could be called different or have different terminologies throughout different cards or
Yeah.
decks.
Are the ones that you're talking about, is that the one I've seen you use, which is like the cards are shaped like circles? Or is
No.
that a different deck? Because I remember the first time you showed me, or maybe the first conversation we ever had about tarot or just divination pulling cards, you had like a round deck. They were circular. Is that
Are you
something?
thinking, is it because it's like circular? Are you thinking of the
They were
image on the
literally
deck?
circles, the cards. It was something different. Maybe it wasn't a tarot card. Maybe it was like a divination where you pull a card and it has like a message or something. But I
Okay.
remember, and it had like really black and white graphics. I obviously you showed it to me like on a Zoom, so I didn't
Yeah.
actually get to hold it. But I remember that, and that's what I thought it was. But typically, I think I think the traditional deck is that Rider-Waite tarot, which is the very traditional looking deck
Mm,
that a lot of people use. And again, I'm super unfamiliar. I have one tarot deck that I work with. I haven't felt called to expand on that anymore because I'm still very much trying to learn this.
yeah.
And similar to you, like I said, I didn't try, I tried not to go so mental and like really get into the logistics of it, though I think that's part of the experience is like having a deeper understanding of the cards and the way that that it's set up. But I use the Goddess Tarot by Chris Swalder, and I really love this deck. I think it's been around at least probably since like the 90s maybe, but I I really wanted to start this practice, and I also really wanted to get more well versed in the different goddesses that are represented throughout the deck, which I think is really cool. So
I
it
love that about
was.
your deck.
Yeah, it was like kind of like educational because I'm so drawn to mythology. I'm so drawn to different archetypes and different goddesses. And so this particular deck does have so many different goddesses throughout history, throughout different cultures, all around the world, which is really, really cool because every time I pull one and I don't recognize it, I'm like, oh, I can learn about, and not only is this like a practice to connect to source, to connect to my
Wait, don't you
own.
have like a fashion of designer one?
Oh, you're so right. I do, but I don't really use that one that often. But that one's more of a, um, I'm like, it's the only deck I
I
have.
was only thinking about that because when I pulled at your house last time and I got Ralph
That's
Lauren, which is
right.
where my best friend works for, so I thought that was so kismet.
That's so
But
funny.
yeah, you're
I
not using
forgot
it in
about
the
that
same way.
deck. Yeah, yeah, yeah. I don't use it in the same way. I got that one a couple years ago. That is an oracle deck, which is something a little different to my understanding, I think. But it is an oracle fashion deck, which I really, really love, and it's fun, and it's kind of a more I actually have that one on my vanity because like if I'm getting ready and I remember to look at it, I'm like, oh, this is really cool as an inspiration. So I just put one card as kind of like a inspiration for whatever style, self-expression, and I do use it not as frequently, but very different than the goddess tarot. But I guess yeah, I mean, where do we want to get into? Do we want to talk about the spread first? Do we want to talk about tarot in general? Because I'd be remiss if I didn't shout out my friend Maylene, who, funny enough, I'm like, do you want to do this? Let me just jump right in. But when I was running the beauty department at Barney's in Chelsea, Maylene was my apothecary manager, and we became really, really like tight friends. We're like, she's my sister basically. And Maylene does read tarot, and she's just an incredible, you know, goddess in her own right and sage, and speaks with a lot of I think just very authentically and with a lot of intuitive
Yeah.
I think a lot of authority and anyways.
I do think while anyone could, because the deck that I got, I mean, it's got a book associated with it and it teaches you
Yeah,
different spreads you can do. I will say that while I feel like anyone can use tarot cards as a practice, there are certain people who there is intuition behind it. There are special gifts to it, right? Where
a
like
thousand
you see
percent.
Chris Corsini and he's like this one upside down paired with I mean, it's just so
Yeah,
intricate. It's meant to be in
yes.
their wheelhouse.
100%. And I think there's like a distinction too. It's like you can, I think to your point, like you can pick up a deck, you can be drawn to a deck, pick it up and use it for daily guidance, like, however you want to use it. You can follow traditional spreads and learn that way. I think there's um, a lot of different ways that you can take it. And then you have the people that just are such great channels for messages and such intuition. And Maylene's one of those people, but um we used to do beauty events in my department where we would set up this really cool table and she would do tarot readings as like a gift with purchase. So if you bought from the apothecary, you would get a free reading, which was such a cool event. And I don't know if other beauty departments were doing this. Like as far as we knew, we were the only ones bringing tarot into the apothecary, which just felt so kismet because like old school apothecary divination practice, like there's just for me, it felt like there's so much synergy there. And we had a really, really incredibly gifted visual director at Barney's, Nicholas, who used to set up these really cool vinyls on the floor and he just would give us this entire visual experience with the readings. And so it was really, really cool to do that. But I mentioned Maylene as well because she's a person who gave me my very first reading. And that also was like a super catalyst for my personal growth journey, a lot of my healing journey, and just turned me on to a lot of these more esoteric practices. And so she did a incredible reading for me and highly intuitive, but also she knew me on a deeper level. Like I said, she's like a sister to me. And she read my cards, and it was just like first of all, it was like one of those, goosebumps moments where we both started crying because she knew me deeply and she
Yeah.
knew the things that we were talking about. It sparked this whole like journey where, you know, part of the action that I got from that reading was to write a letter to my dad and like release so much of what I was holding. And that really like opened the gates for my healing journey over the last several years. So it can be incredibly powerful. And especially when you go to someone who has a gift for this and like it's so amazing. So anyways, I mention all of that because it's important.
Yeah, and I think that there's a lot of different, to keep in mind, there's a lot of different readings you can have, right? Like you
Hmm.
can have those where you're asking about the future. You can have those where you're just
Yeah,
looking for clarity for the here and now. You can do an annual spread, a card per month. You can do
yeah.
a card a day. And so I think like you, I've been on the receiving end of readings where they're just it's too impactful. It's too spot on for people who don't. I mean, in your case, she knew you, but for me, when it started, people didn't know me and it was just too spot
Hmm.
on. And then during
Yeah.
COVID, I would start reading for some of my friends. And I think it's interesting because with tarot overall, where I find myself kind of losing like my openness to it is when it's like that fear mongering of like
Mm,
when if like a bad card comes up or a good card comes up, I have
hmm.
very much been victim to the okay, well this means everything is going to be good or uh-oh, this means everything is going to be
Yeah.
bad. And it is interesting just because I have that very detail oriented brain and I know a lot about my friends and I recall a lot when I could read for my friends or when I pull readings, I can very easily attached to, I think this might have to do with this. And it's always interesting because some people are very open to that, and other people are very
Yeah.
like, well, no, I'm not that, or this doesn't, they really want to take it at face value. And I do think for tarot, sometimes it can feel very face value, but also there's a lot of interpretation to what goes on behind tarot as well. So you're really needing the muscle to be
Yeah.
self-reflective, be intuitive there.
Yeah. Yeah, and be open, right? Because, let me ask you, how do you do like a daily, yeah, what is your tarot practice? Aside, like we're going to talk about the yearly spread because that's
Mhm.
kind of like what sparked the conversation, but I'm just curious too, like how do you use tarot? Is it your daily pull? Do you do outside of the yearly?
Yeah.
Or
Well,
yeah.
it's kind of varied. I mean, the yearly has become consistent for the last 3, 4, 5 years. And it really varies. When I first got it, I was really interested and I was doing it every single day. And then that
Hmm.
practice just didn't stick. So I also heard someone told me that it's really important that you take care of your deck and show it like love and prioritization. So I've always left it, it's always like right next to my bed. So I keep it close to
Yeah.
me regardless.
Uh-huh.
I heard that you're supposed to do those things like love, respect it, and all of those good things. And then I think what happens more so is I'll just kind of get these pings of maybe you could use some clarity. I'll be real honest. Sometimes there
Mm,
is a block of fear where if I'm like, oh, I
yeah.
want clarity on love or this relationship or on work things, sometimes there can be fear. And so that I think throughout the years can sometimes prevent me. But I really love, I remember when I went to, gosh, what are they called? Oh my gosh, it's those beautiful cabins with like these big windows and there's no internet. Just sitting and like really being in tune with my deck and just pulling a lot. And there's also, I think like with the spreads, it depends. A lot of times I'll do a clarity reading. So just like give me clarity on this. Or there's like a
Hmm.
past, present, future, which is just 3 cards, which I kind of like to do as well. So the main consistent thing now is the year. And I also do have some friends who I'll do every year. They look to me and we'll pull for them for the year as well. Where have you started picking up with your, how are you using your deck now that it's more on your radar?
Mm. Um, so I do like to do, I mean, there's not a lot that I do like consistently every day. I mean, that's not true. I do a practice, I journal, all of those things, but I try to have a lot of flexibility and flow in the way that I approach my daily practices, and tarot is very similar. I try to do like a monthly pull at the start of every month, just kind of like an overarching theme. What for me, it's a lot of one, I've tried the spreads, right? Like the traditional spreads. I think there's one 3 card spread that I used to use when I first started using this deck, and I'm going to draw the blank, but I know it's like the situation, the challenge, and I can't remember the last word, but it's basically like, what is the action? Is like, what's the action? And I really liked that one. Like what's the situation in front of me? What's the challenge I'm facing? What is the action I need to take to move forward or move through this? And I really enjoyed that spread and like you said, like that I think provides a lot of clarity. Um, my general approach to pulling cards is truly like I'll do one for the month, and I'm just looking at or I'm asking for divine guidance and what is what theme am I working with? What is something to pay attention to? I like to ask that a lot. Like,
Mhm.
what's something that I should be, placing my attention and my focus on? So I'll always ask that. I feel like that's kind of my go-to is, what divine
I
guidance?
like that one because I think, yeah, I think I provide more so, I go for situations or like areas in life. So I really like that one. I like that. I might
Yeah.
snag that from you.
Um, I really like to do that and I try to keep it, like as open, like I'm just pretty aware that I can't be so specific in a lot of things. One, because I'm just a non-specific in human design, and I find that really does work best for me when I can be really open to the unexpected and to the surprise of the day. But I totally see what you're saying, like with sometimes you can get attached to quote positive or maybe more challenging, and getting attached to any type of outcome. So I think asking for divine guidance, what do I need to, again, like I said, I love asking, like, where do I need to pay attention to today? Or
Mhm.
what's the theme for this month? What am I working with? What energies are present? And just allowing what comes through and see what resonates. So, anyways, the monthly ones are really fun because it kind of it aligns really well with my monthly goal planning and my monthly vision work, which, you know, again, like month to month, 4 weeks can go by really quick. So my monthly visions aren't like drastically, like January vision isn't going to be totally opposite of the next month. They're usually building on each other, or there's some synergy that really tie into the overall theme of what I'm working on. And I like to have that tarot, that one card that kind of gives me some insight into the month of things that maybe I'm not consciously aware of, or I'm not paying or putting my focus on, when I'm creating my goals. Sometimes you can get really in your head when you're creating like your plans for the month. And I think this practice opens you up to things you didn't necessarily think about, which I love. Um, and oftentimes it's usually, I mean, again, there's like a funny meme I saw that was like about the tarot cards, like telling you, like, girl, I told you this, like, why didn't you listen kind of thing.
Yeah.
Um, and it's so true or I think I saw a meme that was like about your cards reading you for filth. Because like, it's so oftentimes you pull something and you're like, this is totally exactly like the energy that I've been like under the surface bubbling there that I haven't necessarily wanted to face or approach yet or whatever it is. So, um, so that's how I use it primarily. I don't do like big card spreads again because I just haven't gotten there yet. Like I've tried it in the past, but I do find, um, and similarly when it comes to this year ahead kind of spread that you've inspired me to do, uh, I need to take things in these kind of like bite size, kind of so that I can have that flexibility. So, anyways, I freaking love the Goddess Tarot. I'm learning so much about it. The artwork on this particular deck, I think, is just gorgeous. There's so many different goddesses that she brings into this deck. And if anyone is listening and they've listened to some of our past episodes, like the Astrology 101 episode, we talk about some of these goddesses. It's really cool. Like we've mentioned Inanna before, we've mentioned Venus. And I don't know if I talked about Diana or Artemis, same one and the same, or different interpretations. Diana and Artemis are the goddess of the hunt. And anyways, so I really, really love going deep into the mythology. So I'm getting so much more out of this deck over the last several years. Even, expanding past just the divine guidance, but learning about these incredible deities and goddesses.
Yeah.
Yeah,
I
I
think
love it.
where the difference with starting to read my own deck is, or do my own readings for myself, no shocker here, is that control element. And so
Hmm.
the process, maybe I'll just talk you through my process of how I learned to do it, is shuffling the deck and really having in your spirit and your mind asking the open-ended questions around that
Hmm.
area, right? And being very broad about it. What I've picked up from Chris Corsini is like sometimes there will be cards that just like flip out and
Yeah.
or come out. And a lot of times, or what Chris says, that I mean, that is just energetically that's meant to kind of come out. So I try to like take notes of that. And there
Yeah.
have been times, which is why I just believe in the energetics and the intuition around cards, where cards have fallen out and I've put them back in this deck and just continued to shuffle. And it's like, that's the
Hmm.
card I end up getting, right? It's almost like, don't
Yeah.
play with me. Like, we need you to get this message, right? And I think the more I've been able to release control, shocker, shocker, around the outcomes of the deck, I think I was tying so much to it. I've really been able to see where it's helpful and where it gives me guidance. And a lot of times I find myself just giggling, like, yep, uh-huh. Like I didn't need this tarot card spread to tell me this, but I've dabbled in it enough too and done enough readings for my friends that really I believe in the power behind this and the intuition behind it. I'll give one example where I was doing a spread. It was more of like a current spread for a friend, and pulled a card, and it had to do with health. And this friend had had some health stuff going on. So immediately I just wanted to be super sensitive because I didn't want to freak this person out. But
Hmm.
unbeknownst to me, there was a lot going on with her partner and their mental health. And
Mm.
so she didn't even tell me this until months later, but she at the time just really the message was for her. And I think that's the thing too, is that when I'm reading for other people, I try not to say like it's this or this. And that's kind of a shift of like maybe if we, because when you do know people, you can start to say like, are you sure it's not about this, or it's not leaning into this? So again, just like coaching is trying to let them interpret how they see the messages coming through as well is important, because there can be a lot around good cards, bad cards, and what that means. Just because you get a card that says abundance doesn't mean that abundance is going to show up in the form of you winning the lottery and all of your problems are solved today, and vice versa with negative cards. Sometimes, quote unquote, negative cards, the way I've heard to interpret those is it's also, this could be a heads up. It could be things to watch out for. It could be qualities that you need to avoid in yourself to make XYZ maybe more simpler coming into your path. And I thought it was funny when you and I were talking, because you said, I'm just going to do the first 3 months because I don't want to look for the whole year. And then I said that I pull my whole year, but before each month. So we're doing the same thing. It just looks a little bit different. I pull my whole
Yeah.
year before the new year, but I don't really, of course, I can see them when I'm pulling them, but I forget what they mean by the time.
Yeah.
So I look the month before just to see what's going on with the year. And then I have a year theme too. You pulled a year theme one, right?
I did. So, yeah, well, and I think, yeah, gosh, so many things come up. One, I keep thinking of this, idea of thinking, our thinking mind, right? Like that's ego. And when we open up to the unknown, when we start to do these divination practices and we allow ourselves to just be open to source or to whatever divine guidance without hold on the expectation, right? Like the expectation is our thinking mind, that's ego, and the openness, that's source energy. And so like um, yeah, like in our intuition, that's our our intuition is like our connection to source. And so we can't know the outcome. We can only know like what's happening now in the present. And so I love that's something that I'm finding really, it's like very fun. Like almost I was listening to you talking about it. It's like, yeah, like it's almost like doing it and trusting that unknown is it's a daily practice in teaching yourself how to embrace the unexpected and the surprise and the unknown and trust, yourself through it. At least that's my interpretation. And
I'm also doing right now, Gabby Bernstein. I have her app. I'm doing her manifestation challenge. I'm reading her book, Self Help. There's amazing resources in there, but every day when you open that app, you pull an affirmation card. So that's
Mhm.
been really cool too. And I've been jotting
I
those
love
down. So
that.
I guess I'm lying. As of this year, I have been pulling a card every day because I've been in her
Yeah.
app, and those feel really, some days again, I just giggle because I open it up. I'm like, yep, yep, I needed that message today.
For sure. Yeah. So I forgot where I was going with that, but it just came up because I'm reading this book. Um, what is the name of this book I'm reading at the moment? It's like my nighttime read before I go to bed. Um, anyways, it'll come to me.
Yeah.
I'm pulling it up right now on my app, but yeah, so anyways, to your point about the spread for the year, it's called Don't Believe Everything You Think. And it's a really good book. It's a great reminder. He talks about our overthinking and the ruminating is the cause of our suffering. He uses this really great Zen proverb about how or it's a Buddhist teaching, or I think it's a Zen proverb, but basically, um, it's our suffering is coming from our thinking of the problem. And so he uses this example of when you get shot by an arrow, the first one is the pain. Um, the second arrow is our suffering. And I'm totally butchering this, but get the book. It's by Joseph Newen. Don't believe
I
everything
mean,
you
I'm
think.
not here sight checking you verbatim. I wouldn't know, but
No,
I
no,
get
no,
the
but it's
principle.
a really great Zen proverb, and and basically he talks a lot about how, we choose to prolong our suffering by choosing to continue to think on the pain. Um, and again, there's a lot more to the experience. You can't just be like, I shut off my pain today, I'm a robot. But there is real truth to that of like choosing it and ruminating and the things, right? And this is a great book about it. But um anyways, tangent on that book because
So random when you said about the robot. My one of my childhood friends, I love this story about her. She used to get so scared when she was younger of monsters and things that when she'd get up to get
yeah.
her parents, she would go, I am a robot. So that these monsters
That's
would
so
think she was
great.
a robot. I'm sorry, that's what it made me think of. So cute,
That's
right?
really
Yeah.
cute, actually. Like, I am a robot. I mean, I told you before we hit record that I think my saying right now is like, I'm not a robot because every time I expect myself or expect another person to act a certain way, you're like, no, no, no. We are all just like living life. We're like doing the thing and we're not robots. So, anyways, that is really funny. But so you pull a spread for the whole year and then look at it the month before and you pull an overarching theme. Very similar. Yeah. So when you told me about that, I was like, oh, I want to do that. And then I was like, well, I tend to work in quarterly or seasonal increments um, just because that's how I roll. And so I was like, okay, I'm going to pull a card for the year of 2025. What is the theme? What's my theme for this year? And mind you, like I had told you this already, but I had already done my vision work for the month and for the year, like I had done at the time. And I had been kind of meditating on some other things that were coming up. So when I pulled this theme, I loved it because I'm like, well, yes, absolutely. Thank you. This aligns with where I was at. It feels good. It's like trying not to be attached to like, this is good, this is bad, because there is no such thing. It's like, it's as good or bad. It's all just experiences, sequences, consequences, all the things. But I pulled a card for for the year, and then I pulled three cards for January, February, March, because one, like, I and this will tie into my card is just leaning deeper and deeper into really living according to the seasons. And I mean seasons, both literal, the actual seasons like winter, spring, fall, summer. I said that out of order. And also inner seasons, right? I think this started when I got really deep a couple years ago into cycle syncing and I got really deep into hormone health and started to understand what it actually looks like to tune into your body and follow the rhythms of your own natural cycle, which, again, ties to this card I'll tell you about. Um, like the 28-day cycle of the moon and the 28-day cycle of our periods and or our menstrual cycle and the seasons. So anyways, that's been a big theme is flowing with the seasons and both inner and outer for me and just continuing to deepen that as a not just a practice but just as a way of living. And so my card for the year was the moon, which was like, yes, absolutely. Thank you so much for this reminder that I'm on the right path and that I am, even when it feels like I'm, you know, I don't know, dawdling my time along and just like all the things that no, like I'm making intentional moves towards and within the life that I want to be aligned with and living. And so I pulled the card. The card is the moon. That is my theme for 2025, and it is represented in this particular deck by Diana, who is the goddess of the hunt, or you may know her as Artemis if you follow whether it's Greco or Roman mythology. And I had told you that before that, I was really one, I read a ton of mythology, not just Greek mythology, but other cultures, but in particular Greek mythology. And there's just been this really cool resurgence over the last few years of authors, of female authors, rewriting Greek women and Greek stories from these famous stories that we know about men, like in the Odyssey, Odysseus, or Jason and the Argonauts, or Clytemnestra's story. So we know, or Helen of Troy, right? We've seen all these films and books and stories come out over the centuries, over history. Um, a lot on Greek mythology that focuses on the men's stories. And in the last few years, there have been so many incredible women authors who have written about the women in these stories who, like true to history, get kind of overlooked, even though their roles are so critical to the actual story and how things play out, as we know, right? Like women are so often the unsung movers and shakers of history. And so it really aligns one
Well, all
of all
things,
things.
yeah.
I mean,
It was that me. Remember, I was telling you that girl on the street was being interviewed. I might have sent it to you, and the guy said, "Who's made more of an impact in the United States, men or women?" And she's like, "Women." And he's like, "The richest person in America is a man. Like a man did this," and starts all these accolades. And the girl just looked at him and said, "But none of these men would have been here without
yeah,
women." And it just was like this mic drop. And so I thought of that when you were talking about it. But you're so right. The more we're diving into it, and I love having exposure to this world through you because I love this world too, is just how a lot of the stories of the females have really been and women have been downplayed or not highlighted
yeah.
in their importance of their impact.
100%. I mean, just using like historically one example of trillions of examples, right? When we historically you see in a lot of these stories, right? There's all these wars, right? And men, the great heroes, they went to war. Well, who held down the home? Who made sure that the children were fed? Who took care to make sure that you had something to come to home to? What about when these are not at war? And again, this is like a very like uh you know, one way of looking at it. But this is just one example of many. But anyway, so I pulled this card and I had been recently, I've read a ton of these books recently because it's just been part of my like reading for enjoyment this last year. I think I read like 50 books last year. Is pretty sick. Not sick, it's a lovely thing, but like I've read a lot last
It's
year.
not sick. And meanwhile, I had this goal of like one a month and I didn't even come close to it. But
That's
maybe for
okay.
another podcast, Taylor and I did have a conversation. I said, "You had told us when we were recording that there's something else going on with my brain, not just the generator." Remember when I told that story about reading?
Hmm.
So We had a whole conversation and maybe for another time about the passive brain or the left and
Yeah.
right areas on the brains. And I have found that, and again, just with all things, understanding more about yourself, understanding right what lights you up, what doesn't, it just I go into reading so differently now just from those tidbits and I find it so much more enjoyable.
Yeah.
And let's get back to your
Yeah,
moon.
so it's symbolized by the archetype of Diana, who she was the goddess of the hunt. And if you know anything about Diana, that's okay if you don't. She was a virgin, um, swore off marriage and relationships because her thing was hunting and animals and taking care and being in nature. And um and so it's interesting, not about the virgin part, but that was a theme for me prior to this card being pulled. And I think I was just kind of, I had it in my notes in my phone, some random words because I was listening to all this stuff. And I was thinking about, I was ruminating on the word purity and not in the, and like Virgo, the virgin. And there's a through line through all of this, as there is through everything, even though it may jump around. But
Well, that's where my head went is like, even if it's the virgin, is it purity? Is it, I don't know.
yeah.
I was like, there's got to be an interpretation. So purity came up for you.
Purity, but before I pulled the card. So it was in my notes
Mm.
on my app, on my notes app on my phone. I was taking these notes as I was crafting my vision for the year. And I was
Oh,
talking
okay.
about, or, for myself, just kind of on the themes of refinement and what it means to approach things with purity and with integrity and with intention. And that's been a big theme for me. So anyways, I have like art in my home of Diana as well. I have like two pieces of artwork of her randomly, but I do. I bought them like years ago. But anyways, it's been a big theme. My focus this year is a lot on refinement, and it is a lot on purity in the way that I approach things with just such intention and pure heart, pure intentions, pure um just pure actions. And so oftentimes we think of like a virgin and we think of it literally, but I really meant it in the way that I'm looking at things or that I'm approaching life. And also, again, just thinking about her life. There's her archetype of being in nature. Hunters need to go with the seasons, right? Like you have to live your life
Oh, yeah,
according to the
yeah.
seasons. And so all of those things have started to come through. I've also had a lot of ruminating on the themes of leadership and nurturing and leading with integrity and that's also, I mean, she was a protector of nature and animals. And so there's a lot of this protector kind of, and I'm a Leo, so this year I've also been thinking a lot about, or last year anyways, about the lioness and the pride of lions. That's what they're called, as a pride. And what it looks like to really nurture. And I think people often meet me or know me and assume like, oh, she's so feminine, she's so blah, blah, blah. And yes, that is very, very true. But there are aspects that I have felt maybe a little bit harder to connect with within my femininity, and that is a lot of the nurture aspect and being someone who versus like when I think of leadership in the past, I've always led with a masculine approach to leadership. This is, like this is that's going to happen, like very assertive, and this needs to, like and holding people accountable and all of those things that are so great about, within that. But there's other layers to it that I've really wanted to connect with, and that is that more nurturing side. And I've wanted to bring that into my relationship with my husband, into my friendships, into my life in general. And I think one, just going back to this deck, the Goddess Tarot, and when you open up the book that it comes with it, it's like this deck is a celebration of all things divine feminine. And I think that's so beautiful because it's just gone into the deeper layers for me. So, anyways, it's really, really tied to my vision. I was like so excited. And again, like trying not to get tied to the result, but it was so beautiful to see this card for the year align so beautifully with what I had already outlined as my vision for the year, which was to deepen my relationship with my husband, to become more open and receptive, and to be really nurturing in a different way than I have been before. Also, to just continue deepening my relationship with my inner and outer seasons and cycles, and really approach all of that relationships, how I, like flowing with the seasons, all of that with a more sense of purity and integrity. And also, yeah, like it felt really good to pull a card that felt like, yes, you are what you are moving towards is exactly like where you are, and where you're headed is exactly where you need to be. Like just keep going and
Felt
keep,
like a little maybe wink from the universe of, yeah,
yeah.
stay that path. It'll serve you well. Let's keep that theme in mind for the year.
Yeah,
That's really
yeah.
cool.
A lot of emotional depth, I think. And I think that's a part of my bigger story of like refinement. That's my word for the year is refinement, because I really want to continue to, it's like this, story of, not even a story, but just like this experience of really, really loving where I've come and what I've come through and where I'm at. And also knowing that like I get to continue polishing and refining and growing into. It's an interesting stage, right? Like I'm 38 and a half, and I just want to continue entering this phase of life with such like, yeah, just like continuing to step into my womanhood and my inner queendom in so many ways. And so it was really lovely to pull that card. So where did I go with that? Everywhere. But tell me about your spread. Let's,
Well, I think you go everywhere because well, this is what we do. This is how our voice notes go.
yeah.
Because for me, you are able to connect it to so many things. And I
Hmm.
think that that is with a lot of different modalities, right? But especially tarot, I think the fact that you can connect it and make it, and it feels like such a cohesive theme. I think walking us through all of your thought process really is relevant. And even, the fact that you have two images or two pieces of artwork from that person or of Diana in your
Hmm.
house, I mean, that could have even just been a little click of, oh, like, let's get interested about this. So it's really cool.
Yeah.
So my theme for the year that I pulled, and you knowing what the end of last year and earlier this year was, I just giggled when I pulled it. I got the devil.
Mm-hmm.
Talk about one of those dark cards that you pull. And like, not only does this represent a month, it's my whole fucking year. So I
Mm.
just started to laugh. I'm like, all right. So I've got two things. So my book will highlight, it gives two main words associated with the card, and then it gives a description. And the words that they use is addiction and negativity, right?
Mm.
So, of course, is it really easy to go into this is going to be a shitty year, right? Of course, it's really easy to go into there. I've also stumbled upon a couple of years ago somebody else who interpreted this deck, and they also have like I'm so envious of you. What's the traditional deck you said? The what?
Rider Waite Tarot.
Yeah, so she analyzes what the card would mean for that deck as well. So you just get to see all of these things. So what I can now do, now that I've done a lot of work around getting my nervous system a little bit more regulated, but so I get to read and interpret and say what really stands out for me and where is this applicable. And the one line that I pulled out that really feels applicable to me is like, this can seem quite heavy, but the truth is that simply acknowledging what is enslaving you is a hugely powerful step in finding liberation. Once you're able to clarify, identify your demons, you can get to know them better and find appropriate ways to free yourself.
Yeah, yeah.
So for me, it feels very, and I haven't really talked this out with anybody, but and this person's interpretation of the card is bondage, inner demons, materialism. And
Mm-hmm.
so for me, this, I think, goes along with the theme of the shoulds and the being external and getting validation through other people's sense of worth or where they deem you're worthy. And I think for me, it's just really keeping a focus on, and it's been helpful, but like keeping a focus on when I ruminate, when I go down, like ruminating, that to me is like not the devil's work, but the ego.
It's suffering,
The, yeah,
100%. It's suffering. It's hell.
it's suffering. And so, we think of addiction and it's like, well, I'm not going to be a drug addict this year. Like I'm pretty certain about that.
Yeah, yeah,
But
yeah.
we have to look a little bit deeper. So what's my addiction to productivity? What's my addiction to, how much I'm getting paid as it relates to my worth and self-worth? And
Hmm.
it does feel very, what are the things inside of you that are holding you back, right? We're
Yeah,
in this
yeah.
phase astrologically where I was just hearing about Stephanie was talking about the spiritual awakening and even these types of things where you are attracting things on your frequency and repelling things that
Mhm.
aren't on your frequency. And so it's not only like how are those being repelled? Because I would say like those are your demons, those are the things, but it's like how are you disconnecting from that in a loving, kind way for yourself? And that's what I'll just keep my lens on.
Yeah.
I just started laughing. I'm like, I could use a year of, whatever you want to call the thing. Also, the devil is a major arcana. Have you heard about the difference between major and minor arcana?
A little bit, just in my like digging into the cards and their meanings, and the different suites. Yes. What were you gonna say?
Yeah, the my interpretation of what I've taken in about the major arcana is that one, take note when these come up in a reading.
For sure.
They hold, I hate to be so definitive, but the way I would say it is they're meant to be paid attention to they hold a little bit stronger energy in the deck, and also they are numbered. And so something I also heard that I keep my lens on
Hmm.
is almost you're thinking about that as a journey. And now here's
Yeah.
where the interpretation can get a little different, right? So if I'm just doing like a 4 card spread, right, on my job or a
Hmm.
frustrating coworker, right, like that can be very different like chronologically than if you're looking at I really want to reinvent my career. So
Hmm.
there's not necessarily a time frame on it, but the numbers chronologically will give you a sense of where you'll be working on that journey. And again, where my brain can go, sometimes if I get an early major arcana card, I'm like, oh, like I have so much more to work through this, but that's not necessarily always how it
Yeah.
goes. The devil does fall towards the end. And so I also attach it. A lot of astrologers have been saying like 2026 is going to be a really huge pivotal year as well. So I don't know if you've heard that,
Um,
but or 27.
I haven't heard any of that, but
Okay.
what comes up is if I think about the devil, um, in terms of a major arcana, and I've also heard this as well that it's that the arcana, major arcana cards or arcana, however you say it, are like it's your spiritual journey, or it's like major life
Mhm.
lessons. And the word that comes up when I hear the devil is fear
Mhm.
and feeling trapped, and the theme or what feels like this card. And like, you didn't ask me to read this card, and I'm not trying to. It's just I'm just sharing what's on my heart.
I mean, it wouldn't be Karmic Mirror, and you know me very well, so it makes sense.
Of fear of being trapped in the fear. And I say this because something I mentioned the Chani reading, right? And you were like, or I had mentioned the shift of lunar nodes, and you had text me back and you said, I've just been something avoiding. And then I like my ears perked up, and I think I voice noted you or I text you back about like, just like, do you feel a lot of stress or worry when you think about someone saying this is a challenging year? Because we obviously are different human beings, we have different life experiences, and we approach things so differently. And and everything is temporary, right? So like just because I'm in a phase, where I'm really open and receptive, this is not, this is not the permanent space. Nothing is
Yeah.
permanent. Um, but anyways, when you say the devil, and you didn't tell me until today because I think you were waiting to tell me until we
I wanted
recorded.
to see your reaction.
Um,
Yeah.
is it does feel like, right? It's okay, a couple things. One, I didn't know about the numbers and the timeline, but what comes up when you say that and you pull the devil card for the year, it feels like just knowing you, it's like, yes, there is a lot of fear. You've said it on the episode, so I'm not saying anything that you didn't already say, right? Like, I can have fear about this card or pulling this, right? And I feel like maybe it's like there's this sense of like being stuck or trapped by the fear that forces you to want to avoid certain things. I also think of like going into the depths of our darkness. And I feel like knowing you, it's like, okay, haven't I already done enough this last couple years? Like, haven't I been through enough?
Well,
But
that's what I
if
kind
you
of
think
thought when I
about,
pulled the card.
but if
Yeah.
you think about the timeline that you mentioned, right? If it's later on, to me, what comes up is like, yes, you have gone through a lot of things that are really challenging in the last couple of years, and for good reason, right? Because you're breaking free of so many things that were just not supporting you and you in your highest, in your most pure, like loving generator self. There were a lot of things that were just dragging you down, like, situations, experiences. So yeah, what was coming up for me is like, one, the feelings of fear that I obviously, one that I felt and I responded to you about, but also that you've said it, right? So that feeling.
Well, and just for our listeners, we were talking about some of the astrological changes, and I was just like, I can't.
Yes.
As soon as I heard like someone was saying like buckle up, and I was like, nope.
Yeah. Well, okay. So for some context, I text Allie the other day and I was like, hey, you're about to have a nodal return. Meaning that the North and South nodes were going to move into new signs, which they did as of the 11th of this month. And they are in Pisces and Virgo. Is that correct? Right?
Yeah,
Which are your natal nodal placements.
sun and
They moved
rising.
from
Yeah.
Aries, but they're also your node, they're where your nodes are.
No, mine are Cancer and Capricorn.
Okay, then I was wrong. Okay, I
It doesn't
thought that
matter,
you were
but still
having,
they
but
impact
it does, but it
major
does.
charts. Yeah.
But you're not having a nodal return. And I thought that you were, so that's why I texted. I was like, "Oh, you're having
Yeah.
your nodal return," because I had mine, but in theory yours would have come before mine because just chronologically that's the way they would move. But I thought that they were moving into, I thought for some reason they were your nodal placements. But still significant because your sun is in Pisces and your moon is in, I'm sorry, your rising is in Virgo, and the north and south nodes have now moved into Pisces and Virgo. So, anyways, I was like, yeah, you're having your nodal return. This is this 18-month journey. I mean, we're all going on this 18-month journey because we all have all the signs in our chart. Listen to Astrology 101 episode on Karmic Mirror podcast. But so anyways, you had responded and you were like, oh, I just like want something I'm avoiding, there's sort of a challenging year. And I was, I was like, oh, like, okay, yeah, I was like, oh, does that make you feel a lot of worry if somebody says that? And because of course, like I'm very much, again, there's so many layers to this, including the fact that like I know very much about myself that this isn't necessarily directly correlated, but I think it plays a layer into the fact that like something I know about myself is that my fight or flight response is very much fight. Like I am like, go there, like, so for whatever reason, I think that plays a role in the fact that, along with other things, when I hear someone say, oh, it's going to be a challenging year, the first thing I think of is like, oh, like big changes are happening. Like I'm about to like move through some shit. And I'm very much a person that likes to move towards like the challenge and the friction. It makes me feel, again, hope is like a core strength of mine. And so that plays a role in the way that I approach things as well. So I'm like, yeah, like I'm going to go through some shit. It's not going to feel good, maybe, or it might be a little scary, but also what's on the other side is like, I'm going to get to a newer version of myself, right? This is how I approach things. And so I was like trying to like gently just like like inquire. And then today we're talking about it. And so, anyways, when you bring up the devil card, just from what I know and what comes up is truly, it's like that. I think of fear, I think of feeling trapped by this fear. And I also think when you say towards the end chronologically, I feel like there's an element of that card that speaks to that, yes, you have gone through this journey of different challenges in your life, of shedding, of grieving, and of growing, which growth isn't like always this joyful process. Sometimes it's really fucking painful because you're like, I am
Yeah.
shedding parts of my identity that I have held on to, or relationships, or things that have been so essential to my life for so long. And I'm moving towards something different or newer version or back to my wholeness, however we want to interpret it. But I do feel like if you're thinking strictly at the end of a journey or towards the latter part of a journey, it's like almost like maybe there's an element of it like, okay, yes, you weren't ready to be in the, like to face like and I'm not saying you weren't, but I'm saying like, um, to be like in the depths of the darkness in the way that you are being called to this year to really alchemize because you were in it, like you were in those experiences, and it's, I think it's like almost impossible when you're actually in it and it's fresh to really like be like, oh, what can I learn out of this, what can I challenge,
Mhm.
but you've gone through so much that this year feels like, yes, like maybe you are going to be in that, like, I think, again, I'm going to talk about mythology, but like
Mhm.
Persephone and Hades, okay? Quick backstory. Persephone was the goddess of spring. Zeus, her uncle, god of the gods, made a deal with his brother, her other uncle, Hades, the devil, to allow, and all these gods corroborated, to allow the devil, Hades, to kidnap Persephone, the goddess of spring, and bring her down to hell and forcibly make her his wife. Which is why we talk about seasons. Her mother, um, who was the goddess of the harvest, she basically took like famine, like took away the harvest because she was like, you have my daughter. And like literally like just starved the people until she got her way. And so that's why now, according to the mythology, Persephone spends part of the year Earth side. That's why we have spring. And then she spends part of the year with the devil. But anyways, I say all this because there's this journey and it ties to the seasons, right? It ties to the cycles of your life of healing. Everything is cyclical, nothing is permanent. But it feels, at least if I drop my like dose of like my own sense of just how I approach things, usually with a lot of hopefulness of like, yeah, like I think, I feel, I don't think, but I feel that perhaps the devil card may even represent just this ability for you to really approach all of what you've experienced in the last few years, all of the things that you've come through and that you're continuing to come through, with like a different sense of like, I don't know, like personal power of being able to, like, you're going to this year, like towards the end of this long journey of like, of just being in the depths of it. Like, yes, I pulled the devil card, and also like I'm an emotional authority. I can roll with that and I can
Mhm.
take this, and I'm fully capable of being in the depths because that's part of my purpose, is to like demonstrate what it means to be in the depths of all of my emotions and to like guide the way of what it means to be in the emotions of the deeps and the sorrow and all of that, and not get trapped by it, to be able to let myself through it and not feel beholden to my fears, like to feel them, like that saying, like feel the fear and do it anyways. Like, I don't know if any of that even makes sense, or I mean, it
Yeah,
does
no,
make sense to me, but
it totally resonates. And I think even in the book's description of the devil, the last sentence, literally 2 words, free yourself. And
did I write that book? I'm just kidding.
royalties coming in. But it's a testament to, I think, looking back on the 2 years, right? Even that conversation is just a testament. I think you're right that I've had a good amount of healing, and not that the healing is done. I think we're always healing things, but this year does feel like a bigger shift, and it almost feels a little bit more like I didn't go through everything that I went through to like now not make it through.
A
Like,
hundred
right?
percent.
And
Yeah,
so I do think, right, like one, just how important it is to have trusted space where on that day, I just know I'm like, this is not going to be good for me to go in.
mm-hmm,
And how do I know that? Free line, because I've done that in the past, right?
mm-hmm,
I think
mm-hmm.
also to know like other things, when the Big Bang happened, I also pulled a spread that year and it was pretty heavy and gnarly. And I was really worried about that year. And so I do have in my brain this like validation that, oh, it was a really heavy year. So even
Yeah,
though it was right, like, yay, tarot cards, I think those are just sometimes in that instance, right? Because you knew I was having like a lot of intuition about the things that were going on, that I was being blindsided or, gaslit
totally.
by. And, I think of the devil and it's just about don't ignore your intuition. Go deep, like feel those feelings, get to the root of it, and just continue to do it. So, but I couldn't help but laugh when I pulled that card. I'm like, the devil. I'm like, okay. And I always think about I love the Florence and Machine Shake It Out song and the lyric that is, looking for heaven, found the devil in me. It kind of feels like reminiscent and, really speaks true to kind of my journey where we're looking for peace, whatever your heaven is, right? And
Yeah,
but you got to go through that stuff. And
yeah.
I'm not going to say that things can't take me out, but there was just this epiphany I had the other day of like, I didn't make it through how gnarly all of that stuff is to let some of this other stuff like take me out now.
Mm-hmm.
And so that's maybe where the devil theme comes up.
Yeah. One of my favorite quotes of many, but one of my favorite quotes that I swear I just like I live by is um I don't even know who says it, but it's throw me in hell and I'll find a way to be happy. And I really live by that. I just like I believe that so to my core. And
Love
maybe
that.
not, and maybe happy is an extreme, but to me, like one, that's my natural state is pretty like, either like but neutral, but I think like we say neutral, but like neutral to me in good space feels like contentment. It feels like utter contentment. And so I feel that if happy is too extreme, like contentment, and I really, yeah. And anyways, this book I'm reading, Don't Believe Everything You Think is so good. Yeah, I have like 100 bookmarks in it because it's a ebook and I can't screenshot it because
Hmm.
I'm borrowing it from the library. But I bookmarked a lot. Like there's so many good quotes. What we hold on to perpetuates our reality. What we let go of creates new possibilities. And there's so many nuggets of gold in this book. It's like
What's the
things that
book?
it's called Don't Believe Everything You Think.
Okay.
It's just so good. And it's like I'm reading it and it's so many things that I'm like, yeah, I know that. Or I know this practice, right? Because there's elements of it that tie back to life coaching, to tie back to everything we talk about. But it's such a cool reminder. And he writes it in such a simplified way and shares so many great quotes that I've never heard before, which I love. Anyways, in the theme of tarot, I think you were talking about some logistical things that I kind of glazed over, but I do think so too. I don't know, like no one has told me or taught me like this is how you take care, how this is, what you do with your deck. This is how you do it, right? And um again, like I mentioned at the top of the episode, like I'm really just dipped my toe and kind of stayed in the shallow end. I don't even know if I
Well,
could
I
say
think, if you get into like right and wrong, right, like people are going to have a lot of different opinions, but some of
totally.
those make sense to me. Other ones were don't like this is your deck. Don't let other people play
Yeah,
with your
yeah.
deck. You can do readings for other people, but not letting them, pull in
Oh,
themselves.
totally. That makes sense. That makes a lot of sense. And the caring for your deck, that makes it like intuitively, but also logically, it just lands. Like I didn't know those things, but I also try to keep I keep mine in at my altar and I have a lot of, very inspirational things around it that just because it's the altar. Um and I try to, when I do pull, I typically do cleanse. Like I don't sage. I've never really had sage in my, not that I haven't ever. I don't, maybe I have in the past, but I've always been really drawn to Palo Santo. So that's the only thing I've ever really used in terms of like smudging or
Hmm.
cleansing smoke. But I do use that prior to pulling the card. I try to just thinking about some of the preparation, like I try to cleanse and come at it with or come to the any type of pull, whether I'm just pulling a card for, sometimes every once in a while when I feel the call, pull one for the week ahead, um, for some divine guidance. But I do try to approach it, like you said, like do a little quick breathing and cleanse and make sure my hands are clean energetically and physically, and try to put myself into a really that kind of calm state of mind and place so that I can receive. And so sometimes I used to do it a lot after I would meditate when I was doing it more regularly. But I'm really excited about this kind of quarterly and yearly theme. This is the first time that I can recall really doing it and really paying attention. I pulled the Queen of Cups for the month of January. That's my card this month, which is very exciting. The
What was
Suite of
it?
Cups, Queen of Cups.
Mm.
And the Suite of Cups in this particular deck is represented by Venus, of course, cups, water, which is more of just, again, like the
Isn't
Queen of,
Venus doing something astrologically? Not to overly make connections, but Venus is doing something. Anyways.
I'll have to look at the transits. There's always so many, and this is why, like, it's such a beautiful practice. Like astrology, divination tools, all of these things, I feel, um, that it's kind of similar, when Rick Rubin says like you learn the rules so that you can forget them, but not that I am like trying to forget any rules or anything like that. It's just that you learn these structures or you start to do these practices so that you can start to connect in your own way and really start to tune into your intuition. But the Queen of Cups, some of the words to describe this card for the month is soulfulness, emotion, inspiration, a mastery of all that Venus represents, which is the arts, beauty, intimacy, love. And like on my quote unquote goals for the month, like were things like having, intentional date nights, which is so funny because when I told Keith that, he was like, we have date nights all the time. And I was like, yeah, you're right, actually. But like maybe it's not about scheduling them because we really do. And then we went on a trip and it was like so sweet and romantic and all the things. Um, I think it's more so, again, like my openness to it. And here's what the kicker for me in astrology is my Venus is in Virgo. And I think I've mentioned this on the podcast in the past, but like I've always not, I've never really looked into my Venus in depth. I've written about it, I'm aware of it, but I haven't really dived into Venus in Virgo. But my Venus is in Virgo. And I think that when I first started getting into these other placements, I was a little bit turned off by this placement. And that hasn't happened to me. Like, I generally take my natal chart as, like, yes, this is me. It's good. It's exciting. I want to learn more. But when I saw my Venus in Virgo, I was like, what is that about? And it made me feel. I think I've said this before, but it totally made me feel like, oh, is this why I can be really critical? Why I can be like, I don't know, the words like, I don't know, just uh
With Virgo, it's seeing what's not working and getting it to work, right? And I know that
yeah,
can be so subjective. So when you're searching for words, that's what kind of came up for me is in Venus, that feels
totally.
right. Like it's
Well, the
supposed to be
two
like,
just don't
yeah, they don't
they
seem like
don't
they mesh well.
necessarily, that's exactly because I'm like, yeah, Venus, how am I in relationships? How do I connect? What kind of like, and it did feel like more, it didn't feel very romantic, let's say that. And I thought like, gosh, like am I always going to be like this in relationship when like I'm feeling like this desire to want to be more nurturing, to want to be this like very open, and also, life that makes you turned off by things like, especially in relationship, can kind of harden you to things. And so, anyways, but then when I started to dig into, I was listening to another of my, my history podcasts and and also I was listening, I've read like, I've literally swallowed up every book on like all of these, as I was mentioning earlier about the women who have been rewriting women's narratives in mythology and Greek mythology especially, and really getting into those themes of Virgo, of the Virgin, of purity, and what that really looks like outside of just the traditional interpretation of those words. And so, anyhow, it's been really lovely to allow myself to be held and allow myself to soften a little bit in relationship and to trust, because I think that I was like very Virgo, veganist and Virgo, like logically could really trust the very things in front of me in relationship, like trust the stability and all of the things that have come really natural. I'm very fortunate to be married to someone who's like my pal, and also like all of the other aspects in relationship, but like we really we do life pretty well together. We don't, and so, but I was like, and I think in the past, I would look to him as like, well, why aren't you more romantic? Why aren't you more? And I'm like, and then, as you start to, do your work, you're like, oh, actually, it's not that you're not doing it. I'm not allowing you to do it because I'm blocking this off. And so it's, that's part of my work and the goals. I mean, talk about, I told you I'm living according to the seasons and really deepening this way of living. And part of that is using the winter months like January to work on these more softer kind of goals or intentions that aren't necessarily like making big waves out in the world, but like really working on my home life and my inner world and letting that lay the foundation for the rest of the year.
Yeah. So my January was Six of Pentacles, which is prosperity, growth, generosity. And if you read a little bit more into it, it's the Six of Pentacles indicates that your long-awaited fruits are ready for harvesting, bringing more wealth than anticipated. Make sure you are generous during this bountiful time. This card can also signify generosity coming from someone else. If this is the case, accept the help with grace and put the resources to good use. And
Mm,
so what comes up for me is this continued theme of I said really early on in my Big Bang that I have a really beautiful community and I have had a really hard time accepting help, accepting others' generosity, especially, and that's all the programming without feeling that I'm owing something in return. And I like to say about my journey that quite literally the universe gave me no choice other than like you've got a really great community who can you give so much, let them give back to you, and they put me in a position where I had no choice. And what I
yeah.
think about this card is I'm in a different spot in life and I do have a lot of choice now and I do have a lot more independence and mental clarity. And so a theme that's been coming up for me and why I think this is such a relevant card is I think like in the past it's like, oh, I know what this is going to look like. And my whole theme last year is you decide the what and you let the universe take care of the how. And I've
Hmm.
always gotten so hung up on the how things are going to come to fruition and how I'm manifesting those and what those might look like. And instead, just really focusing on, I had my neighbor's dog passed away. I have people going through things, and financially, I'm not where I want to be right now. And I was like, I go right to, I'm going to buy them this. I'm going to buy them a card. I'm going to buy
Hmm.
this. I'm going to do this. And just that's not really responsible for me right now in a lot of
Hmm.
ways. And I'd already started to have this mind shift around generosity isn't just monetary.
A
And so
hundred
I've
percent.
found that, and I've been rewarded in so many ways that I've just been giving people my time, and that's generous. And so many, and just even I've been starting to purge my house and
Hmm.
things like something that's maybe really nice, but I'm like, you don't use this. You're
Yeah.
hanging on to it because it's nice and or someone gave it to you and whatever. But I've started giving that to people who would
Hmm.
appreciate it and not holding on to it. And that re-looking at the Six of Pentacles, it did. It helped me, and this is how I use tarot. Is like, yeah, like that does feel like a theme, and it makes me feel like good. Like you're aligned,
Yeah.
and not just, I think a couple of years ago, and if I would have pulled that, I would have thought like this looks like a new job. This looks like an inheritance. This
Totally.
looks like whatever. We already know by my Capricorn and South Node, I don't inherit large sums of
Oh,
money, so I'm not waiting
you're
around for
funny.
inheritance. But that's kind of what comes up for me with my Six of Pentacles, and I think also it was a good duality to pulling the devil card, right? Where if I would have,
Yeah.
I don't know if I would have pulled the devil card and the death card for January,
Yeah,
I would have
yeah.
been like,
Oh, yeah,
what
that
is
was the
going
other
on?
card that you made me think of when you were talking about, challenging aspects or, bad, good, etc. And I think death is a card that people always associate it
I look at the death card much differently now, but
100%.
yeah.
Yeah, like just rebirth or the chance to close a chapter or, for something new to come through. It's really interesting about that. And um yeah, so much, so much. When you were talking about giving away things that, you're like, this is really something really nice, right? Like that feels like also the themes of the Devil card too, which are like in the Pentacles, right? Like material things and feeling and fear of like holding on to the things because of whatever reason, right? Rather
Yeah.
than being like, actually. Yes, I'm allowed to have lovely and nice things. And also, I can be freely and I can give them away. I don't need to hold on to it if it doesn't really align with like my style or my home space or anything, um, that also is like something very tiny but freeing and can be impactful in terms of like releasing that energy of like I have to hold on to this thing because it's nice or it's expensive when really you're like actually I can just give it away. Somebody else will appreciate it and that feels more aligned than holding on to it. Um
I
really
remind
really fascinating.
Yeah, I think, well, finances I think it's a
Yeah.
big area that I'm cleaning up, and
Mhm.
along with the what and the how from last year that I took away from the abundance course with Ian Van Zant, was this keeps coming up for me. Like, how are you treating money? Right. And she talks about just respecting money. Like, is all of your cash just like thrown haphazardly somewhere? And
Mhm.
that was some other steps that I've taken just to like really respect money. Like, one, I've had all of these gift cards for years. So I've started using them. I've pulled them out of like that drawer. I know it's like
Yeah, yeah.
insane, right?
I
Like
remember you told me you were like, I have a Sephora gift card, and I was like, girl, use that gift
I
card.
know. It's like, I mean, for years. And so I've started to use that, right? It's because that's how money works is, out and in. And the
Yeah.
other day I was walking and I like saw a penny on the ground and I walked past it and I was like, no. Like, because I remember her saying, she's like, 100 pennies equals $1 and $1. Like, how are we disrespecting? I'm like, you literally just set up a coin jar at your house to be respectful of money and you're walking by money. It's like, why? Because you don't want someone to see you picking up a penny. Like, I get it, but
Mm,
it felt bigger and that's what kind of the
yeah.
Six of Pentacles feels for me is like that ebb and flow. So I'm like, pick up the penny, just bring it home. Like we're respecting money. We respect it when
Yeah.
it comes to us. And so yeah, that those are some things that kind of stuck out for me as like earlier in the year. I'm like making sure all my bills are paid, like really getting in on all of that stuff just to really
Yeah.
clean up money, right? Like where's money
Totally.
due, where's it owed, all that. So
Yeah, yeah. I thought you were quoting Abraham Hicks with the how and why is none of your business. Have you ever heard her speak to that? She
no, no, no.
channels. Well, Abraham Hicks is a channel and um yeah, yeah. I mean, I won't go there, but if you're listening and you listen to her or you tune into Abraham Hicks, then like you get what I'm saying. And if you don't and you feel called to, definitely give her a look up. And if it doesn't resonate, it doesn't resonate. I don't like live and die by the words that she channels, but I do think that there's something really interesting and aligned with what you said about that. Like, focusing on what it is you want, your desire, and letting the how and why be none of your business. Which
Hmm.
is counterintuitive to like goal planning, but there's different layers to do both, I think. So, anyways, what else? Anything else to talk about? I mean, there's just so much, and I really, one of the things I'm calling in is a someone who reads tarot professionally that really feels like they can speak to this topic because I'd love to do an episode talking about tarot. In the future, it would be so lovely to have someone who gives, maybe a monthly or a seasonal or what have you, moon readings, whatever we feel called to in the moment, whatever is the most aligned would be incredible for selfish reasons and also for just all the reasons. I think that would be really amazing. The last thing I had in my notes was about the card, the moon, or just about Artemis, specifically Diana. I'm using those names interchangeably, but that Artemis represents empowerment through self-alignment. She doesn't seek external validation, but follows her own rhythm. And I think that's what really resonated in terms of my theme for this year.
Well, that's all things meandering around the topic of tarot. So, hope you enjoyed. And again, if you are a tarot card reader that would love to lend your services and let our audience know more about it, please hit us up. But until next time, Karmic Mirror
All
listeners,
right, everyone.
thanks for tuning in. If you resonate with today's conversation, connect with us on Instagram at Karmic Mirror Podcast and send us a message.
And don't forget to subscribe wherever you listen. And if you're loving Karmic Mirror, we'd appreciate a glowing review or share with someone who could benefit.
As we close, remember, life is not a one-size-fits-all approach. How are you honoring your unique path? Stay curious and always be kind to yourself. Until next time on Karmic Mirror.